got my machine set up. I have switched out the regular sewing needle, which is just a standard general needle, for a leather sewing needle. This is the needles I'm using. See if we can get this to focus. There's nothing special about them. Most sewing machines can handle standard needles. This will probably fit on your machine. Double check to find out, but for the most part. Something to keep in mind with sewing leather. You sacrifice speed for torque, which means if you lower the speed of your sewing machine, it goes through thicker stuff better. So I've got mine all the way down. Sewing videos are notoriously difficult to film. I never know what I want to show. I never know whether I should just breeze through everything and go, yeah, and then I sewed this and then I sewed that, because then it's just me talking a lot. So I'll try and highlight a couple of things real quick. Higher table means I sew standing. It's hard to hunch over when you're standing. So if you have a problem of hunching while you sew, try elevating your machine, see what happens. Still have the foot on the floor. It's going to be set to a standard thing. I'm probably going to pull you over here so I can see the camera. And we'll take it from there. I'm going to start with the hood. And we're going to start with the black because that's what I have in my needle. Or in my machine, I mean. A lot of these sewing machines have weird numbers up here. This first set of numbers represents your stitch. The second set represents how long the stitch is. And then this bottom one is how wide it is. And it's all in millimeters on mine. So when I say things like I'm setting it to a 4 length, it's 4 millimeters. Not quite sure where I want this, so I'm going to leave it exactly where it thinks it wants to be. I do know that the edge of my foot is exactly 1/2 inch from the center of this needle. So if I want a 1/2 inch seam allowance, all I have to do is run my needle right along this foot. Or run my fabric right along this foot, I mean. We're just going to set it up. I tend to start a little into the fabric and then back up a bit. Okay, that might be a little too slow. Now there are fantastic sewing machines that sew leather really, really well. This one sews fabric okay, or leather okay. So now here's the dangerous part, right? So there's an overlap. It's because I cut it long because I didn't want to mess with it. Now if I put the wrong side of this and I line it up in the wrong spot, since it's got an overlap, lots of problems. Which is why I marked a T and a T, so I can start both of them at the same place. I'm just going to do that again. You don't need to watch that. So we're on to top stitching with the hood. And I have to decide whether I want this, whether I want the seam allowance folded towards the center, which would look like this. Let me get a little closer. Whether I want the seam allowance to look like this, or if I want it to look like that. I'm leaning towards this. So I think I want the seam allowance towards the center. So I'm going to fold this over and then just stitch all along this edge. Alright, so now I've moved the needle over so it's a 1/4 inch from the edge here. That way, you know, I get a nice top stitch. And I'm going to do the same thing, except this time I want the stitching on top. Or the grain side on top, I mean. I'm also going to make the stitches a little longer. Probably 3.5 mil. And then I just stitch. This hood turned out fantastic. Right? It's got that, because it's huge in the game. And when he pulls it back, it's got kind of a Jedi look to it. Oh, I am so happy with this. Do the exact same thing in red. But real quick, I only put one seam in here, right? Top stitch. Most top stitching has the double stitches. For my video games, I tend to only go one. because most game assets only have a single stitch there. It's easier to read on a game than it would be in real life, so I tend to only put one for my video game characters. But back to red, we're going to do the exact same thing in red. We'll pick it up at, oh, the difference. How this the seam folded towards the center, I'm going to fold it the other way on the red. That way I'm not stitching through 6 layers of fabric. At most it's only like 4. It just saves my machine a little bit of effort. So I'll see you in a second. The red's done. It looks fantastic. So now I'm going to stitch the two of them together, right? To make sure that I have the right size together. And I'm going to start at the middle and work my way down. Because these two front seams are the seams I care about. If the sides are a little off, I can trim them to match. Doesn't really matter nearly as much as the very, very front lining up. So I'm going to stitch that together, and then we'll come back in a second. This is the part my sewing machine's going to hate. I'm going to switch out the black bobbin on the bottom for a red bobbin. So that the red has, so the red has red top stitching and the black has black top stitching. If your tension's not set right, this looks a little funky. As you know, you get a little red in the black, or black in the red. We're about to find out how well my tension is set. But I'm also going through a lot of layers of leather right here. So, we'll see. There are sewing machines that can handle this stuff super easy. This is not one of them. I could almost hand stitch this faster. Wouldn't be as consistent. And I'm really not faster, but I just... slow drives me crazy. It would appear the bottom bobbin is not catching at all. So when a sewing machine struggles like this, and the needle gets too much resistance, it messes with the timing. So the shuttle doesn't quite hit properly. And you miss stitches, which I think is where we're at now. I'm going to take everything apart, clean it, try it again. We'll be back in a second. I don't want you people to hear the kind of profanity that I'm about to start spewing. Try as it might, this one doesn't want to go through 4 layers. So I have this thing. This is my leather sewing machine. It'll sew through a tire. Like from a car, an actual tire. It'll just, without even batting an eye. It's hand crank. It's... Let me pull you around so we can look at it together. Alright, so this thing is not my favorite, right? The whole thing is hand crank. I could put a motor on it, but that terrifies me. Let me back you up just a little bit so you can see the whole thing in its glorious state of being. There we go. This is 100% mechanical. And it sounds it. But, like I said, it'll stitch through anything. So, I'm going to tri-flow the whole thing. A lot of people go WD-40 for lubricant. WD-40, when it gets hot, turns to glue. This is tri-flow. Tri-flow is amazing. If I'm gonna put lubricant on anything, I'm using tri-flow. Superior lubricant. Hood's done. At least enough. Enough for now. It's not terrible. It's not fantastic, but it's not terrible. An actual leather sewing machine is on the agenda. They're just expensive. And I'm not quite there yet. So the next step is the back piece. I'm going to sew the princess seams together. Then I'm going to fold it inward and then top stitch that. Pretty simple. That this thing can handle. So it's not an arbitrary decision which way I fold the seams, by the way. So it looks like the seam is here, and then there's a line next to it, which is why I fold it that way and do the top stitch, because that'll replicate that decently. So, you know, there is that. This is the duster part. There we go. I want to line it, just because I don't like having raw leather. So I just cut out a small scrap of canvas, and I'm only going to stitch along the bottom, and that's where I'm going to top stitch as well. Right side to right side, flip it over, you know, just the standard how you would stitch a thing. I'm just putting in relief cuts right there, so when I flip it right side out, these can curve a little better. It just makes top stitching easier. Don't like when my sewing machine makes new noises. So there's the back piece. Now I'm going to stitch the two backs together, but I'm going to leave. I'm going to stitch the two backs together, but I'm only going to stitch down, I'd say, to about here. That way when I do the split at the bottom, I don't have to fight with anything. It just seems a little easier. I haven't decided whether I'm doing top stitching on this yet or not. If I do, it's going to be something completely different. I know I just said I'm not doing anything different. Now here I am, completely different. I intentionally made this piece way large. Let me pull you up so you can look. Let me go over everything real quick. Should only take a second. Alright, hood. Pretty much done. I like the hood. Hood turned out fantastic. The back here, I intentionally left this long, and it's just going to die in the sleeve, and then I'm going to cut off all the extra. That's basically how it looks. That's pretty neat. I like that. Onto the front. So top stitching is more than just making it look nice, right? On these edges, for this seam to split, it would have to split through this top stitch, which has everything folded. It just makes it much stronger, right? Now if I were to fold the center seam flat, the only thing holding all of this together is this one little thread. If that thread snaps, whole thing's coming apart. Super easy. So I have a just over 1 inch strip of black leather. It's hard to explain. Let's do that thing again. So like I said, the only thing holding this together is this stitch right in the center. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my strip, put it on top, and then stitch on either direction my top stitching. Stitch in either direction my top stitching. I'm going to stop about halfway down. That way I still have room to seam the bottom part. But stitching this now ensures that when I put the other piece on top of it, I can just keep going. And then when we do our split, if my top stitching is going in each direction, I can just continue that top stitching. I can continue that top stitching all along this edge. So it'll just go straight and then go down, right? It'll look much nicer. But, like I said, I'm going to top stitch this piece on top all the way along. So I put everything together on the back, and I did a real tight stitch to the edge. That way when I do my 1/2 inch seam allowance, that stitch just goes away. But it makes the whole thing effectively one piece. And yeah, I can trim off all the excess and have a nice clean thing to deal with, instead of having a bunch of little pieces all put together. So the back is all done. It's way better. It looks way better than it has any right to. Hood is done. I'm ignoring the sleeves for a while, because the sleeves are going to be super difficult with that weird cuff thing that going on. And I got a patch, but it's tiny, and I can't find any that are just a little bigger. So I don't know if I'm going to just leave it off for now and stitch it on afterwards. It's probably what I'm going to do. So now we're on to the front. But it's about dinner time. So I'll probably pick this back up tomorrow. The front is going to be interesting. At least I think so. So we've got the gray piece and the black piece. They get sewn together. Of course, luckily, there's a line and I marked the top. So I'm just going to fold these two over and sew them. I'm also going to do the same to the lining. Since the lining is almost identical, I'm just going to sew both of them, flip them out, and figure out which way I want to top stitch. Weird side note here. On angled stitches, right? So this is... You want to line it up so the piece actually overlaps at whatever your seam allowance is. So in my case it's 1/2 inch, which means I want it to stick out about that much. It doesn't look like it quite lines up, but once everything is folded in one way or the other, it's going to make a perfect seam. So you always want to make sure that when things overlap, that they overlap at your seam allowance. But speaking of things overlapping, we're now at top stitching. If you look on the reference, give me a second, there we go. So if you look at the reference, there's a stitch right there. You can kind of see it pretty clearly, right? I'm not doing the top stitching now though, because I want to top stitch both the top and the bottom together, or the inside and the outside, the lining and the leather. So this doesn't do any weird folding. But to do that, I need to make sure that the leather lays in the right direction. Chrome tan. You can't wet form chrome tan really, but you can beat the snot out of it until it does what you want it to. You can also heat form it. Heat forming works also, but I'm just gonna hit it, make it nice and flat, and then move on to the next piece. But to do that, I use lots of grommets and eyelets and snaps, all kinds of things. And I had to pony a little piece of lumber that went to the ground, and so I don't have to be hunched over on the floor doing all this stuff. This is something I would normally have to do on the ground, because I didn't have a large enough pony that could support that. I still don't, but I have one that'll make it a lot easier. And I kind of added it into this. This is neat. Let me show you. So this is 3 2x6s that go all the way to the ground. So I have this monolith pole that's just above the ground. So all I have to do, slip a wedge under here, and now this is all the way to the ground. And anything I do here transfers straight down, and I don't have to worry about table absorbing things or deflect. Nope. Straight to the ground. This is a built-in pony. I love this thing. So now I can just grab my mallet, hit the leather, pull it, and I don't have to be hunched over to do this. Normally by this point in time in a project, a sewing project, my back is killing me because I have to. You can't do a lot of this stuff in an upright position unless you fully plan for it. Moving my sewing machine so I'm upright, it's a game changer. It absolutely changes how I function as a maker, and I wish I'd done it sooner, but I'm very glad I did it now. So now I'm just going to keep beating these until they're all flat. So now for the lining. And the lining is the exact same thing we just did. So stitching the back together, stitching the front together, and then we'll pick up there, because I think that's where things may get interesting. I don't know. I have not been looking forward to this part. It's the sleeves. And these things are just weird. They're super complicated, right? I've got the stitch line marked out. I haven't done that to the other side yet because I want everything to match. So I have a paper pattern of the stitch line. I'm just going to line everything up as best I can. Trace it, and then trace 1/2 inch inside so I know where to cut. There's a lot of turns in this thing, and that makes it more complicated than I want it to be. There's my stitch line. So I want to measure 1/2 inch down, because the sleeve is 1/2 inch up. Like I said, these are kind of complicated and weird. It's a devil may cry, of course they're weird. So there is the basic outline. Now, once this is going to get cut off, and then this is going to fold in, because the seam allowance is going to be on this side. We've got a couple of spots that are going to be a problem. Right here, there, 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 there. So this is pretty much how I'm going to sew it. I'm going to sew straight to here, along this, straight to here, and everywhere I've got the relief cuts, it'll fold that way. It's leather, so it'll stretch a bit when I do weird things. But I'm going to trace this onto the other one, and then sew everything together. I want to start with this line here. It's in the middle, so that should make for going both directions easier. So I'm going to start by lining this top one up and just stitching. So I flipped it over so the red's on top now. And I'm probably going to have to do that a lot on the sleeve, which is why I fully marked both sides. So we've hit the point now where I need to cut my little relief in, and then bend everything over and stitch along this side. So my seam allowance is going to be on the black, which means the black has to, the red's going to lay relatively flat to what it is. It's the black that has to conform to this. So that's why I'm putting the relief cuts in, because when that's flat, all of these are going to fit like that. You're going to have to do a lot of pushing and pulling, getting everything to fit, hit it with a hammer a couple times. We'll be fine. It's annoying, but it's not the end of the world. So I'm going to do this, and then we're going to pick it back up in a minute, because I don't need the pressure of everybody watching me. This one I'm not overtly happy with. I don't like the stitching here, but it is what it is. It passes the 5-foot mark. This one turned out much better. It's got a weird angle to it, but it is what it is. Those sleeves, unpleasant to say the least. But it means we're on the point now where we get to put everything together. We got a bunch of big decisions to make at this point. What order do I want to put everything together in? One of these sleeves is supposed to have a patch, by the way. I have it floating around here somewhere, but it's tiny and I don't like it. I'll put it on after the fact. I think we're going to start with the shoulder seat. So we're going to take the outside and the two outsides, put them right side to right side. These aren't going to match up. Let me show you. These aren't going to match up because this is a lapel, which does complicate things a little bit. I got it backwards anyway. This doesn't match up because this is the lapel. There we go. That's better. I'm like, the sleeve. No. So I'm going to stitch all the way across on both sides. I'm going to do that on the back too. And then we're going to put the back together and we should be done. Before I do the side seam, sleeves get sewn on. They're just getting sewn straight on, right? I'm not making a hole and tape, no. And then we're going to do the armpit and side seam all at once. So all I'm going to do, I'm going to line it up, make sure the left sleeve is on the left side, and then sew this thing straight across. It's a lot of leather to mess with. Now to do the same thing with the red. You don't need to watch the red. Didn't even need to watch this part, but you know, gotta have something in the video. I have it draped on a mannequin, and this is how it was. I've cut the neckline here so it can lapel out, and then the hood can also lapel out. So I'm just gonna trace this, cut that out, see what we can do about this hood. There are days. So I'm fighting with this hood, trying to get everything to go right. Right? And I measure if I take 4 inches off of here and line this up, it'll lay right. And I'm looking at this, and I'm paying a little closer attention, and there's a little T right there, and a little T here. I sewed the wrong seam. And the minute I put this on, it looks perfect. Sewed the wrong seam. Not the end of the world. I need to have kind of a return on this, right? Because this part here needs to be finished. I may just leave this stitch. I don't know yet. I'm going to sew this and think for a minute. With all that sorted out, everything suddenly fits well. There are days I do unbelievably stupid things. Doesn't make me a stupid person, as long as I learn from the experience. So I stitched the right front together. Man, that is super red on, well, it's super red in person too. Now I'm going to stitch I also put a split right there, so I have a thing to sew to. I'm going to sew this onto the outside and see where we're at. Look at this monstrosity. They make really nice leather clips, so you can clip leather together. I don't know any. I should just Amazon a bunch of them, but this is where we're at. This is the entire top collar with the hood in it, the whole thing. I'm just going to start, actually I'm going to start in the middle and go one way, then in the middle and go the other, so it doesn't walk on me. But this is going to be an unpleasant sew. I don't know if my machine can sew through it. We're about to find out. Whoa, come on. When plan A doesn't work, on to plan B. Well, we'll give this thing a shot again. It's a lot of layers of leather. I didn't actually expect it to stitch, but I was hoping. So, the hardest part about using this stupid machine is, since the throat is so small here, which is really useful for stuff like shoes or whatnot, but on something larger, a bigger plate would be nice. So the hard part is just keeping a consistent 1/2 inch seam allowance. Does that sound as horrible to you as it does for me? It's a vile noise. I'm not going to put you through that. I'm going to stitch this and see what happens. There are days where you fight with the project nonstop. Today's one of those days. But, hood is on. I'm very happy with the hood. This should have been a little more at a 90. I will live with it. If that's the worst of the costume, I'm okay with that. But it looks like the part, right? I'm happy with it. I've had problems with sleeves. I just have problems doing sleeves. There's got to be an easy way of doing it. And I think before I do the understitch, this one, I'm going to connect the sleeves together and then do the whole thing as one solid loop. And that's where we're at now. I'm going to connect the sleeves and see what happens. So that worked faster and better than it had any right to. So I'm going to go over it primarily so next time I do a sleeve, I'll have some reference. I can look back and go, what did I do last time? So basically have everything all lined up. Take my two ends. So there's my sleeve. Fold everything in and fold this in. Then I move it around so I'm on the inside. So it's right side to right side, all laid out. I hope that made sense. I'll probably look back at this and go, wait, what? And stitch that straight across. This jacket is exceptionally heavy. Then trim the lining to match a little bit because it's a little bigger. Leather does not stretch the same way fabric stretches. So now I have a sleeve that's connected how it's supposed to be connected without this centerpiece in, right? So what we do next. I'm going to start by folding everything in half and just putting a small stitch at the end here, at the cuff. And then I'm going to have to stretch the leather to reach because leather is my measurement, since everything is just kind of on the fly, don't perfectly match up. And the only way to get this to match up is the red stretches more than the black, but altogether it stretches enough. It'll be fine. I'm overcomplicating things. Trying to explain a thing that doesn't need to be explained. My top thread keeps snapping on me. So that's just to lock everything in. So now I turn the whole thing inside out. This inside out and go from the armpit to the wrist. I'm overlapping the pieces of leather so my machine can go through it because 3 is its limit. Oh, beep. Doesn't like the 4, and that's where all the red overlaps the black on the cuff. Keep reminding myself that this is not an actual jacket. This is a cosplay item. It doesn't have to be perfect, so I'm going to wear it probably a few dozen times. Reach in, pull this right side out, and the sleeve, except for the hemline, or hem. So yeah, except for the top stitching. We'll call it top stitching. Should be done. It's not perfect. It's not bad though. It's kind of the attitude of this entire project. It's not perfect. It's not bad. So now I'm just going to stitch the rest of the sides all the way down. You don't need to watch that. So here's where we're at with this. It's a Dante doesn't wear a shirt. He has a tank top on underneath. Hence the tank top on underneath. And it is, I'd say 90% there. All right, 75%. There's no top stitching. All the everything is together except for the bottom hem, which is what I'm doing now. So I'm just going to sew this all the way down and then back up. So I'm going to sew the whole bottom hem and we'll pick back up at this point. So for the tail part, I am just sewing the little notch we put out. My poor sewing machine. Then I'm going to finish off the back seam all the way down. I've got my lining from that flap stitched a couple inches, and then the whole back is done. So now I'm just going to stitch each side up until it hits this point right here. That's 90% of the jacket done. I give it 99%. 95. A solid 95. I'm going to do top stitching around the sleeves and then figure out where I'm going to do from there. I know the sleeves get top stitching. I don't know if anything else does. My poor sewing machine. As soon as this is done, this whole thing comes apart, I'm going to take the whole bottom plate off and just lube everything. Because it's not happy with me. It needs a spa day. And I thought, well, it's just a sleeve. I can do this real quick. Oh, for the goodness. I fear my sewing machine may not be long for this world. Alright, we're shutting you off while I take this thing apart and see what I can find. It couldn't do it. My poor little brother couldn't make it through it. And it died. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I burnt out the motor. If you saw last week's video, you know where we're going. This, America. It's my new leather sewing machine. Let's back up a little bit, get a little better view. This thing is fantastic. Goes through leather like nothing. Only goes forward and back. There is no back and forth on this one. It's just forward and back. And because of that, this is not good for a regular sewing machine. It's perfect for leather. Which means I'm probably going to have to pick up, yet again, another brother. But with this thing, I should stop burning them out. As far as the jacket goes, the inside lining hasn't been closed yet. That's so I can still access the innards, because I kind of need to stitch the collar a little better. Now that I have a machine that can handle it, that's what we're doing next. And then after that, top stitching. Then I think we're done. Jeez Louise, look at that. That stitching is fantastic. It didn't even skip a beat at the stuff here where I was having huge problems with my other machine. It just went right through. Just like nothing. Man, this thing is fantastic. I guess he's done. All that's left now is to put him on. I love this jacket. It's fantastic. Ebony and ivory, perfect. Sword, good. Still a little weird. It's a weird sword. The costume looks fantastic. I love these boots. Oh my goodness. Let's go out with the boots. I love these boots. Look at that. These are a random eBay find that Kim found that just, oh my goodness, do they fit the costume perfect. I am so happy with this thing. Oh my goodness, the whole costume is fantastic. And I cannot wait. One thing I do have to keep in mind is I have to remember to correct my posture so my gut doesn't stick out too much. Other than that, this thing is, it's an actual jacket. It's a full leather jacket. That is so cool. Couldn't have done it without that thing. I'm very happy I did it. Now Dante is off the list. Done. He gets to go into a bin till C2E2, and then we'll probably bring him out then. I love the holsters. Just having somewhere to have these two things so I can have either the guns or the blade. They don't slip in that well. But once they're in, they stay in. It's a really simple costume. I've had to do a lot of stuff to make it work, but it does look like it worked. I'm happy. I look like the character. And that's really all I can ask for. Except for maybe a like and subscribe, because this was a decent amount of work. I think I earned it. If this is your first time here, I make costumes, I make props, I do a bunch of stupid things, and I have fun. I like what I do, and I like my channel. I hope you like my channel too. If you do, maybe think about sticking around. Guess that's it. Hope to see you next time.